Okay, well, I tried to record this a couple times, and first I didn't have the microphone on, and then the second time I didn't actually press record. So, hi everyone, my name is Adrian. Thank you for being here with me today. I just want to talk about the telepathy tapes. If you haven't heard of this, please check it out. I listen to them on Spotify, but you can find them other places as well, and you can just go to the website thetelepathytapes.com and listen to them there and find all the other places that you can listen to them as well. But anyway, the podcaster Kai Dickens had become aware of this phenomenon of many non speaking autistic people being able to communicate telepathically and wanted to help neuroscientist Dr. Diane Powell explore this further. So they started traveling and meeting with different families and testing this ability. Now, being the type of person that I am, I was already aware of this. I'd already been aware of this heightened telepathic ability in autistic people. So obviously, I didn't need any convincing. But I think that this podcast can really do wonders for opening up other people's minds if they're just willing to listen. Because, the sad thing is, people just dismiss things automatically without knowing anything at all. And unfortunately, there's still even many people who don't even believe that non-speaking or minimally speaking autistic people are even competent and intelligent beings, which is so upsetting and frustrating to me. How small-minded can we be as people? Like, when did everyone become so out of touch, so disconnected from our true nature and our connection to everyone and everything around us? Consciousness is all around us, and all living things are conscious and have intelligence. Thankfully, there are people who never lost touch. It's just been the dominating paradigm that has kept the masses of people from knowing and believing this. And this limited thinking has been so damaging for so many people, everyone really, but especially those who have been historically dehumanized. It's truly taken many forms when you really think about it and get into it, but it's just so heartbreaking that it's so normalized to just believe that autistic people and people with other types of disabilities aren't in there. I personally can't understand why people ever just assumed this, but I do understand that it's just difficult when you've been taught to see the world in a certain way, and that it's actually scary for most people to learn that they didn't have it quite right. And so they resist the possibility of things outside of what they have known. It's just difficult for me to understand why the automatic assumption had to be that autistic people aren't in there. Why would we not ask other questions? Why wouldn't anyone ask, well, is there actually something that I'm missing? And this idea of not being in there is brought up quite a bit in these telepathy tapes because many of these people were, very much materialists and skeptics of many things and only believed in what science could demonstrate and that kind of thing. So many of these families and other people involved in the research are just absolutely mind blown. Not even just about the telepathy, but many of these families were just blown away that their autistic children were actually intelligent and actually able to communicate once they were able to access spelling or access the ability to type on a device to communicate or whatever it was, and that they actually knew a lot of things. There's many skeptics, even just with this concept, even when autistic people are able to do this without the support of someone supporting their wrist or elbow or shoulder or whatever, which is just bizarre. It's truly bizarre that they even have to question it when someone does need a little support. Like, hello, just because some autistic people struggle with their motor planning and being able to control their bodies doesn't mean that they have a cognition problem. But moving on. Yes, it is difficult for many people to believe that telepathy is a real thing. And I know it's especially hard for people to believe that all of us are actually capable, actually have the potential to access it, but it's true. it's not some completely out of reach ability only for the extremely gifted psychics and mediums who are born being able to do it. Everyone has the potential to develop telepathy and other gifts. Non speaking and minimally speaking autistic people and other types of non speaking people appear to have a stronger ability to do this. There seems to be a greater frequency of this occurrence within this particular group of people. I imagine this is because they have more reason to exercise that muscle, so to speak. To the need is greater because the usual form of communication for most people was not accessible to them. I mean, I clearly have the ability to speak, but all of my life I have longed for a reality where we all communicate telepathically with each other. Because though I can speak, a lot of the times I find it exhausting. It's very depleting, especially when you have to do the whole small talk thing with neurotypical people, but really all the time. I have a very hard time translating my thoughts into words, which is why I script most of these YouTube videos, because otherwise it would take me way longer to edit them than I already do. Because, often I think about more things as I'm recording, so then I start trying to interject things, and then that slows me down and takes time, and there's more pauses than originally there were. And then also it would just take me way longer to record in the first place. I'm just way better in writing, and I also comprehend writing way better. Like, verbal instructions are actual hell to me. I used to panic in school if I couldn't see something written down. But okay, these tests that they would do and these telepathy tapes were things like having the autistic person blindfolded and having usually their parents, because some of them only had a strong enough telepathic connection with one person. There were varying levels of ability, but they would give the parent a word to read and concentrate on, or they would just use a random number generator and then show the parent. And all this while the autistic person is blindfolded. There'd even be a partition in between them, or they'd even test this while they were in different rooms. They never showed the autistic person or said anything out loud, but they just concentrated on whatever it was in their mind. And then the autistic person would spell it using a letterboard or a device, or sometimes say it vocally if they had some speaking ability. And they would have them do other tests like, I think, pairing different colored popsicle sticks to the right color while blindfolded. And they did one where they were pulling random Uno cards and having them tell you the right number and color of the card without ever actually seeing the card, and things like this. Because it's not just the ability to access another person's thoughts, but it's access to the entire field around us, basically the quantum field, the ether, the net. Many words to describe the same thing, right? And I love that this podcast got into so many other things as well. Of course, it just makes sense. I mean, when you're like me and very familiar with the world of spirituality and extrasensory abilities and studies of consciousness and quantum physics and things like this, it's very easy to see how that initial intention of attempting to verify telepathic ability leads to all these other questions and the connection to gifts beyond just telepathy. But when you've never been exposed to these topics, I imagine it can be quite a lot to take in and seem so far out there and hard to believe. But when you hear these stories, it becomes more and more difficult to dismiss, which is why I would encourage anyone who isn't familiar with this to give this podcast a listen. Again, they're called the Telepathy Tapes, and they're hosted by Kai Dickens. the further you get into the podcast, the more they talk about other abilities that these non speakers had. Probably the most common ability, along with the telepathic ability, was mediumship abilities. Many of the families were aware that their autistic loved one would see and hear and be able to communicate with passed on loved ones and other spirits, and hearing this really hit for me and just makes so much sense given the things that I know and I understand. And the thing that really hit for me though was the telling of one situation where someone, and I don't remember if she was a teacher or maybe a counselor or just someone who worked with autistic children in some way, but she talked about how she could see a glowing light around a young non-speaking autistic kid, and then very clearly received a telepathic communication from him where he told her she was seeing his light body and that she was there to help him put his light body into his physical body. And so, if you're not familiar with spirituality in any kind of way, I'm sure this last bit is definitely sounding absolutely insane to you, but I really don't care because when you actually experience these things, there's just no denying it. But anyway, this made me very emotional because it verified something that I already knew. I had already had this understanding of what was occurring. I already knew from my own connection that autistic people are kind of half in and half out of this plane of existence due to an inability to fully bring the spirit into the physical body. And obviously, some have more distance than others. But I even heard directly myself upon waking one morning something along the lines of needing to pull my soul all the way down to my feet. And that confirmed, like, the way that I heard it was a little bit weird, but I had the understanding of what that meant. It confirmed something I already had a suspicion about because I always have a difficult time in the morning. When I was little, the way I would describe it is I felt so weak in the morning. I would say I'm weak in the morning because I recognize that it's more difficult for me to use my body first thing in the morning. So for me, the morning is when my energetic body or light body, whatever you want to call it, is the least integrated into my physical body. Movement is hard in the morning, and so is speaking. And I've talked about that here before. I always try to explain why I don't talk in the morning, and my family doesn't really get it. They always called me rude for not talking. At this point, they finally stopped bothering me about it though, but I had to explain it about a million times and they still don't really get it, but they just let it be at this point. It doesn't even feel like I'm able to talk in the morning. Like, can I make myself? Yes, but it just doesn't come out easily. It feels like it comes out rough. And overall, it just requires way more energy from me. And I'm just not willing to do it first thing in the morning. I need time to adjust to the world again every morning. So, anyway, hearing that part of the podcast was a major confirmation for me. I knew that a lot of the difficulty of autistic people came from this. Like, our spirits have a hard time integrating into this world. And I can feel the way that some people might respond to this, like it's taking something away, but it really doesn't have to. This doesn't invalidate anything. What we have to understand as people is that there's just so much that we don't actually know or understand. And if you really paid attention to science, you would know this. It's the paradox of knowledge. You realize the more you learn, the more you realize you don't actually know anything. Okay, and then another thing about this podcast that was very exciting for me to learn is that many of these autistic people would meet at what they called the hill, and they would communicate with each other. If it has to be described, the hill is a non physical location. It's like a place in the astral, you could say, or like a certain point in the quantum field or something. But they found that many autistics were aware of this place, and they would even have friends that they only knew from there, not even in the physical world. Like, one parent talked about learning that their kid had a best friend, and I forgot the name now, but the parent assumed that it was someone from school and was trying to find this kid at school, and to set up time outside of school for the kids to spend time together so her child wouldn't feel as lonely. But then, of course, she realized this wasn't from someone from school, it was someone from the hill. Well, that's probably about all I have to say for this video. Lots of amazing things in this podcast. You should definitely check it out. If you've already listened, please let me know what you think. And if you haven't, you can come back to the comments after you have and let me know. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, you can give me a like and subscribe to this channel. It's very much appreciated. And if you're feeling especially generous, you can make a donation to my Ko-fi or the other places I'll have linked in the description. You don't have to, of course. It just really helps me out. The goal is definitely to be able to monetize on YouTube, but we're still working up to that at the moment. And I have another gig going on, but it hasn't been giving what it needs to, and I've had to struggle a lot. But it's fine because I'm no longer identifying with that reality. But I'm just rambling now, so thank you. I will see you in the next video. Bye.